Shabbat Shalom. It's a tradition at Beth Jacob to have the teens who went to Israel this past summer share some words about their experience. In 2019, I was the only one, and we were going through an interesting time, so I never was able to, but I would like to share some words now. In the Passover story, we talk about the Jewish people exiting Egypt and having a journey through the desert, including questioning faith in God, strengthening the community, and prepping for the generation that will inherit the Promised Land. This summer, I went on my own journey with Camp Ramah Poland and Israel Seminar, exploring my people's history, finding what makes me Jewish, and why having a Jewish homeland is so important. As many of you know, my Divrei Torah tend to stray from the path a little bit because I prefer to tell stories. The following is an excerpt from my summer story that impacted me in a big way, just like the journey through the desert impacted our ancestors. I used to think I controlled the sky. Rain came down and I was sad. Clouds stretched between horizons when I was disappointed, and the sun shone during the happy times. I knew my Poland journey was going to be tough, but it was important that I learn the history of my people, the journey our history took us through to receive the Promised Land, while testing and strengthening our faith. It's important to learn about my history because Poland isn't going to be easy. There will be death, emptiness, and questions, not all of which will have answers, but I need to go. Maybe I will finally find my place in faith. The questions I keep secret can be released, and a weight will be lifted from my chest. The Polish sky is white. The clouds spread out across the heavens, and it was so blinding I needed to squint. 20 Jewish teenagers who met on the bus ride from the airport stood at the entrance to the Warsaw Jewish Cemetery, waiting for our tour guide to lead the way. The girls were sizing up the guys, and the guys were trying to impress each other with stupid comments. I stood to the side and watched the interactions unfold. Our journey was about to begin, and I wondered how our soon-to-be newfound knowledge would play a part forming this community. The next day we went to Sobibor, a Nazi death camp. As I got off the bus, I craned my neck back to feel water droplets on my face. The sky was gray, not a patch of blue in sight. My gaze dropped to the horizon to see a line of tracks veiled in fog. I half expected a whistling train to emerge, with faces peeking through the window and hands stretching to touch the fresh air. To my left, there was a single piece of wood lying horizontal across two metal bars. The camp was the end of the line. The only way to get off the train was to step onto the platform of solid black granite. "Marisa, come on," my counselor beckoned me towards the group. The platform was a lie. People believed the platform to be a symbol of freedom, but the stale air and compact cars. Instead, once their feet hit the platform, families were separated, and everyone was ushered to the gas chambers without pausing for breath. Jewish prisoners helped fellow Jews off the cars and willingly let them walk to their death. Belongings and baggage were exchanged for a ticket and false promises. The luggage would be waiting in a warm cabin on a comfy bed. "Marisa, let's go." I turned towards the voice and watched my legs take me down the path through the woods. I faintly noticed the trees and dirt surrounding me, and I had an overwhelming feeling of needing to stop, to look around and think and take in my surroundings. I needed to process, but my legs continued to follow the group, and so did I. Death lies at the end of this path. Thousands of people walked this path into a gas chamber and a fire. I walked down this path like those before me, not knowing what awaits me at the end. I walk because the rest of my group walks. Sobibor isn't a camp where people died by accident. It was an experiment to see how efficiently people could be killed. People died here because others saw them as lesser, animalistic. Basic human rights were withheld from prisoners, and people were demonized against their will. My ancestors walked this path like cattle to the slaughter, and all that's left is trees and silence. "Watch your step," my counselors warned. I obeyed and looked up to find a white sea. We had been warned not to expect anything. Sobibor was burned to the ground. Every last bit of wood and wire was disposed with flames. The gas chambers, the fences, the bunks, all joined the ash of the corpses that burned here. We had been told there would be nothing left, and I hadn't believed it. I wanted something. Some scrap of wood or wire to touch and make the death real, to know the lives lost here were not in vain, not forgotten. But there was nothing but a desert of white rocks in a clearing. The rocks covered the mass graves where the bodies were dumped. They stretched never-ending into the tree's darkness. The group walked side by side around the rock pile in silence. There were no birds chirping nor squirrels chittering. The sky was a distorted reflection of the rocks, empty and bright gray. My numbness subsided halfway around the pile, enough to hear sniffles around me, but I ignored them. We needed to experience this alone. I've heard stories of people reciting the Shema on the path I just took. The Shema, a holy prayer where you focus on nothing but God surrounding you, was recited on the trek to death. The Jews never lost or questioned their faith, but instead believed God was fair and just. Nazis committed atrocious acts and deliberate acts against their fellow humans, and maybe they were brainwashed, but the genocide was deliberate. There's nothing left here. There are no buildings, no fences, so the Nazis must have known of evil intentions if they intentionally burned everything down to avoid suspicion. So how do people still commit to their faith to a fair and just God who desecrated his own people? Is it fair to call myself Jewish if I question the existence of a supernatural being or a man on a cloud throne sealing my name in a book of life? On the other side of the rocks, our group held a ceremony for the bodies buried in the mass grave. Reciting the El Melech Rachamim and Hatikva, we remembered a horrid past, but had hope for a free future. On our last day in Poland, we put the past and present together as we visited a Holocaust memorial in the middle of the Krakow town square. Sitting under a tree, I peered through the branches to see patches of blue. The sky was spotted with puffy white clouds, the kind people lay down to find shapes in. The sun shone on the black chairs that were big enough to make a statement, but small enough the people of Poland continued life without a second glance. Bikes, cars, and buses whizzed by, rivaling the silence of 20 Jewish teenagers consumed in thought. The memorial stands in the center of town, and people are just strolling by and ignoring the symbols. Empty dinner table chairs parallel those in front of me. The people that would fill those chairs died because of their faith. Their belief in God was strong enough to warrant their death. Is it fair to call myself the same when I question such notions? The next night, applause rang through the plain as we landed on Israel's tarmac. We were officially in the Holy Land, and I immediately felt at home. Before I set foot on Israeli soil, I had become a part of the majority. The feeling was awe-inspiring. After being forced to take a nap to compensate for jet lag, my group piled onto a coach bus and drove off to our night activity. Everything was tinged in red from the dying sunlight trying to peek through the closed curtains. When I stumbled onto the street, the sun was getting ready to disappear for the day, but I still had a comforting warmth. As the counselors walked us through the old city of Jerusalem, I realized almost everything around me was made of strong and sturdy stone. Jerusalem has withstood millennia because each block has a specific purpose to support those above them. The blocks may not all look the same, but they have each other's backs throughout time. They create walls, ceilings, and steps, of which I climb up 3 flights to the top of a tower. I could see the whole city from here. The Kotel, the Dome of the Rock, the separation of the quarters, and as the sun began to sink behind the horizon, each rooftop sparkled with gold. Wow, Israel's so beautiful, but that's just the cherry on top. Now I understand why having a Jewish homeland is so important. This is a place where Jews can feel safe and loved. The Jewish community is bonded throughout the entire country, and they have one another to rely on. Just like the bricks, my community has been holding strong for 2,000 years. Our flame and spirit can't be extinguished because we come back fighting every time someone tries. Even though I have to go back home in 6 weeks, I know the entire Jewish community will have my back in everything I do. I might be the top stone of the wall, but I have history, heritage, and community supporting me from decades of time. I believe in the Jewish community traditions and values of sticking by and supporting others, and that's what gives me the ability to call myself Jewish like those before me. Marisa, come sit down. Each teenager received 5 slips of paper and was told to write anonymous messages to someone in the group. It could be anything we wanted, a compliment, a bullying comment, a random thought, anything our heart felt the need to let the other person know. I received prayers for health, hearts for my friends, and inside jokes to make me smile. We had been through an unexplainable journey of education, remembrance, and hope. We stuck through ups and downs, tears and smiles, and as I looked around, I saw the future of the Jewish flame and my part in keeping it lit. After the writing activity dispersed into girls taking Instagram photos of the city of gold, and the counselors took us down to the Kotel. The Kotel is known as the closest spot to God in the Jewish religion. Our group stood on a ledge overlooking the mass of people praying. The Kotel was awash in an orange glow, almost like a heavenly light shining down from above. Those who it was their first time in Israel stood at the railing to the ledge and looked upon the holy landmark. Our counselors explained it was tradition for these people to stand at this railing and set eyes upon the Kotel and recite the Shechianu together. As they began to recite the prayer, I took a hard look at the wall. The orange glow wasn't from the heavens above, but orange spotlights on the ground. There were people wearing modest clothing and others wearing a t-shirt, but each was connected through the prayer and traditions. Suddenly, I realized the sun was almost behind the hills on the horizon. As our bus group walked back down the stairs, linked arm in arm, I gazed at the sunset, a simple yellow stain in the sky. We are the next generation of the Jewish people. We are responsible for adding our stones to the wall that will uphold those of future generations and strengthen the foundation our ancestors laid before us. It was our time to lay down the mortar, and start building. Shabbat Shalom. Chag Sameach.